then we were at our Bible study and not trying to go into another study, and it was almost Daniel, and Trinity wanted Daniel, I think. And then Lester pointed out that this whole quarter, this new quarter, is basically Daniel. So we said, well, we don't want to do it twice, so we're going to do this, and he's going to go another route. Did you not say your friend was Daniel too, Hunter?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought. I said, Daniel. Daniel keeps popping up. So
And we're still just waiting on Daniel to show up.
yeah, we got Daniel.
Yeah, our next Daniel.
Bingo, bingo, bingo. Yeah, all right, so I've got complaints. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about that thing. People said some can't hear me, so Annie, can you hear me? She was the one. I was trying to get her to move up, so she said, I ain't moving, we'll just get her back.
I said, well, if I move up, everybody's gonna have to move.
Yeah. So, the title of today's lesson is Daniel Honors God's Law. And, of course, Daniel will start studying this, like I say, this is the first chapter. And actually, there's a lot of prophecy and other things that happen, the lion's den and all that, the fiery furnace, and a lot of things that happen. But today's introduction to the whole thing is really, he's about 12-year-old. He's just a young boy. He's just a teenager, him and his friends. So that's when we start this series of studies on him, and Richard will follow up with more. But although he's just about 12, 13-year-old adolescent, he actually served for 70 years under 4 different kings. Rose to a really powerful position. And another little tidbit of information, I like to get the tidbits to kind of get things in your mind's eye, as Crockett would say, or background, sort of. He is one of the characters in the Bible that nothing negative is said about him. A lot of people, a lot of kings, a lot of apostles, David, this song run over and over. There's something negative that the Bible say they did here, they fell there, they stumbled here, or they didn't obey Jonah, run away. They did something negative, you know what I'm saying? But Daniel, no negativity. He didn't say no, he didn't back up. And you're going to remember this, I'm going to try to thread this through the thing. He was a man of integrity. Integrity is a real strong attribute. But if you will then, let me read the light, you read the dark, please. Let me get me some. Yeah. I need a lot of help. Speakers and lights and hearing aids. I'm handicapped, so. Daniel 1 picks up in chapter 8, but we'll pick up those first 7 in a minute. Chapter 8 says, but Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat or with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself.
Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs.
And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse, likening than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me in danger of my head to the king.
Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah,
prove thy servants, beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink.
Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants.
So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days.
And at the end of 10 days their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat.
Then Melzar took away the portion of their meat, and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse.
As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams.
Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar.
And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king.
In all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm.
And Daniel continued even until the first year of King Cyrus.
Ben, lead us in the word of prayer before we get started, please.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you once again, Lord. We thank you again for this opportunity in your house, Lord. And Lord, we ask to be with Brother Reese as he brings us a message, Lord. And Lord, be with the teachers in the back too. Be with Brother, as he stands to bring the message. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Lucas, I thought it was a name. Didn't get like that sometimes.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, so Daniel, young boy, just starting off here. We'll hear a lot more about him as we go through this quarterly. Let me give you some background. Well, I need to read the first 7 verses. Here. Because we start in verse 8. To give you background, all you need is verse 7. Okay, Daniel. So, background is this. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into Jerusalem and besieged it. You remember the Assyrians, the children of Israel's Jews were just sinning over and over and over, over and over and over. And he would punch and would do different things. And you remember all through the Bible, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, he'd let them come in and capture them and carry them off, make them slaves and stuff like that. Then they would be for years and years, then they would come back. Now, the ones that got carried away from Jerusalem, some of them never did get returned. Some of them would get, the king would release them. They could. Those from Judah, there was like 3 runs on Judah from these kings, especially Thomas Nebuchadnezzar. And this was Gentile heathen kings attacking the Jews, right? And they would carry them off and make them slaves. But God allowed that to happen. It says, in the 3rd year of the king of the Jehoiakim, king of the Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, unto Judah, besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, to the hand and with the part of the vessels of the home of God. So God approved that. He approved that punishment, okay? Which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of the God of his God, and brought the vessels of the treasure to the house of God. That was when they ransacked it and stuff, went to the temple. They took the gold goblets and stuff that used for sacrifices back to these pagan churches back there, which was a big no-no. big no-no. So they did that right off the get-go. And the king spake unto Apanaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed and of their princesses. There's where them young boys got carried back. See, Nebuchadnezzar said, hey, when you want to go to the king's family, to the prince's family, and get some of these young people and bring them back. But pick out not the crippled, but the ones that look good, that were healthy, that were kind of wise, that would look good in the capital, or in the temple rather. He said, pick out the ones that cream of the crop, basically, is what he said, and bring them back, because I got use for them down the road, okay? And the children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and all such that had the ability in them to stand at the king's palace, in whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them daily provisions of the king's meat and the wine he drank, and they nourished them for 3 years. At the end of that time, therefore, they might stand before the king for approval. See? And among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Ezra. Also, unto the prince of the eunuchs, gave names, for he had Daniel, the name was Belshazzar, and it was Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego. So that gets us through the introduction of what happened and how they got there. And that's 1 through 7, which brings you up till right now. And when the king had these young boys there, and let me read this. But Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not, N-O-T, defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. So they're carried away. They're carried back there. They're just these young guys. And what makes sense here was he and the other boys were okay with their names being changed. They said, oh, no big deal. We're slaves. We got carried away. And so they were trying to change their identity all the way around. He had future plans for them. These were going to be counselors and people that worked in his kingdom, servants. So they're okay with the name change, and they were okay with the new education. See, this was a Gentile heathen nation, and it was Chaldeans that was teaching them. So they wanted them to know the culture, just like when people come from other countries to America, they used to first would learn the language, learn the language. And then they had to study history, know something about the country, stuff like get acquainted and get brought in. So that's what he was trying to do, even way back then. That's what they were trying to do when Kingdom took over the kingdom. They brought these slaves back. How are you going to talk to them? We got different languages and stuff. So there was a training program. And so these eunuchs, let's see. So he was actually, the king Nebuchadnezzar, bad person, was giving them special treatment. See there? He said he gave them the king's meats, the king's wine, the finest stuff, because he wanted to bring them up like an elite bunch, so they could be worthy of serving him. But the king's meat and the king's wine. So if you were in a pagan country, that meat and stuff that they were eating was from pagan gods and stuff. So they didn't want to defile their bodies. It was supposed to be, so these boys were familiar with the Mosaic law. Some animals clean to eat, some animals not. These pagans eat everything, anything. So it defiled their bodies. They said, no, this goes against our religion. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And there was, like I say, that had already been used for pagan gods, so no other god, they couldn't do that. It was forbidden stuff, so there was another reason. There was 3 or 4 reasons they would not sell out or just go along with the king's wishes, even though the king thought he was being good to him, and he was giving him preferential treatment. See, so you got to get that in your mind. I don't know if I'm explaining that good enough to get that across to you, but the king's meat, it wasn't their meat, but it was the finest food and the finest they could have. So they don't want to do that because, like I said, it would go against their religion. So, so Daniel requested that to the prince of the eunuchs, the leader. They had a leader over them because these worked directly for the king, and he had delegates coming on down. But the eunuchs, that he might not defile himself. So he come up with another plan. But to make this all click, I kept looking. I said, eunuchs, eunuchs, eunuchs. And I noticed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 5 or 6 times that he mentions eunuchs. I said, I remember that. You know, what's a eunuch? And I looked it up again, and a eunuch is this, but it makes sense when you're thinking about the slaves and stuff. A eunuch is a castrated human male. And the history of that is from remote antiquity. It means years and years and years ago. Way back in the first centuries of China, the Ming dynasty of China, eunuchs were employed in the Middle East. We're the West, over in China and out the East. In China and in the East, these countries, the 2 main functions of the eunuchs were as guards, as servants in harems or other women's quarters, or as chamberlains to the king. Eunuchs were considered the most suitable guards for many wives or concubines a ruler might have in his palace. And the eunuchs' confidential position in the house, and for the princes, they were in a special elite group. They were upper class, so the eunuchs were entrusted, sort of, enabled them to influence a lot of people. They were kind of almost like royalty themselves. And they worked directly for the princes and stuff. And they, through that, over time, they gained stations in government and policy and stuff, right? Some rose to be bodyguards. Some rose to be confidential advisors, just like Daniel did to the king. He was an advisor to the king. And ministers, they were sort of ministers, generals, admirals. Most eunuchs underwent castration as a condition of employment. That had to be one of the conditions because it was controllable. Though others were castrated by punishment, or when they were sold by really poor people. Still others, the priest volunteered to be castrated to avoid sin. The castration, they represented no threat to the king. The eunuchs didn't have, there's no history of eunuchs, or none of these 4 boys that we're talking about, ever being married, ever having wives, or even having kids. So the cliques, it makes sense. He's going to take these people from another country back, but they'll never rebel. They'll never raise up against them. They'll never multiply like the Jews did. And see, the Jews multiplied in Egypt. Then they finally said there was 2 million plus, you know. But these kings were a bit wiser than that. They wanted to subdue them, castrate them, no wives, no kids, no opposition to the king or his family. See, it was no opposition. So that makes perfectly sense. Less low testosterone. They wasn't dominant nature. They wasn't threatening their masters. They weren't going to raise up and rebel. So it was a perfect setup for the Nebuchadnezzar and these kings. And they were only loyal, because they had no wives, no family, no nothing. They were loyal to the king only. So it made sense. Now, having said that, there was a lot of eunuchs in the Bible. It's mentioned, like I say, 5 times here. And it just took a lot of them to run the castles and stuff, and the government. So anyhow, having said that, Daniel, and let me say this up front, it doesn't explicitly say in the Bible that Daniel or these other 3 boys were castrated, but it implies it all the way through. It implies it everywhere. Doesn't say it exactly, and you can go do research on it, and I did, and there's evidence that a lot of believe that they were, because they were in that group and they were doing that service, and everything fits. There's no wives, there's no kids, but it doesn't say it. So anyhow, through this association with the prince of eunuchs, Daniel come up with a plan. And Daniel was, well, it says, now, God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. His Aspen, as was his name. He was kind of like over them, or superintendent, or officer in charge over them. And the prince of eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear the Lord, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, who has appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse lacking than children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head of the king. Daniel's plan was, I don't want to take the king's meat, and I don't want to break the Mosaic law. I don't want to sin against God, so I'm not going to eat that stuff. You can change my name, you can make me go to school, but you can't make me eat or drink. And that was his integrity. He would not give in to that. So he come up with a plan about, we don't want that fine food, just give us what they call paste. Paste and water. And he said, we'll do fine on that. We'll do fine on it, paste and water. Which means, they were the first vegetarians, I guess. Paste is vegetables or grain or anything that's grown. But no meats, no forbidden meats, no bad meats, nothing like that. And so he thought, Daniel was not a troublemaker. That's why it says, the Bible says that he was favored by that prince of the eunuchs. He could get along with him. He was intelligent. He was persuasive. He was just a people person. So he got along with him. So he thought he'd use that connection to convince him of a plan B. Which, don't make me eat that stuff. Don't make me go against my God, you know. Let me do this. But now get yourself in the eunuch's position. He had to please his master, the king. If he was going to disobey anyway, he might be losing his head. He said, I can't do that. And then the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord, the king, appointed me to eat your drink, and you should see your faces where he said, I'm afraid the king is going to examine you. He's going to come in and look at you. He's going to watch and see how you doing. He's going to get updates and stuff like that. He's going to test them. They're going to school. And listen, that training that is going to school, that prepping, they started about the pre-adolescence. They did that when it's before puberty. So again, that's why it makes sense they might have been, castrated. They started right then, lasted for 3 years. It's like going to school and all that stuff for 3 years. Then they would be tested and they would be accepted or sent away. And I mean, I tell you up front that Daniel excelled in this. He really excelled. It was 4 of them and he really excelled. And he said, why should I take a chance? The king might cut my head off. Then Daniel responded and Daniel said to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah, this plan. He said, here's the test. Prove thy servants. He said, we're your servants. We could be eunuchs. We're servants. That's what they were. He said, prove it. Test us. Test us. I beseech you, means I beg you, for 10 days. The 10 days is a short time. See, God was involved in it. You can't see a whole big bunch of difference in 10 days, but he said, just test us for 10 days and let them give us pulse to eat. Pulse just means vegetables and wheats and grain and water to drink. Then, he said, let the countenance be looked upon before thee. He said, you come back and look at us. You check us out. See how strong we look, how toned we look, how tan we look, how healthy we look at the countenance upon thee. And then he said, you decide of the children of Israel the portion of the king. Look at the other guys. There's a bunch of them taken. There's a bunch of them in training. Look at the ones that's getting all the meat and the fine foods and the finest wines and all that stuff. Compare them to us four that we're just getting water and vegetables and see who looks the best. He said, you look at this. And see, in that 10 days, he convinced him to do that test because he said, okay, I like you. We're going to try this thing. I could probably pull this off in 10 days and the king won't even know it. He won't even notice it because I'll check you first. And if you're looking weak and bad and poor and skinny, he said, I'll put you back on the king's meetings. I'll put you back on. So there's no risk to me. I'm not going to lose my head. You follow the logic? You follow the logic? Okay, I'm not going to. Then he could turn them right back and then get them back on the king, and he wouldn't be in no problem. So he consented. He went on with him, with Daniel's plan, continues to them on this matter, and proved them for 10 days. 15 tells us, and at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fatter in flesh than all the children that did eat of the portion of the king's meat. See, it's a bunch of them, like I said, all the children means many. And so these four here, when they compared them, they look better, they look stronger, they look toned, you know, it says fairer and fatter in the flesh than the others. So that proves the point, and they won their case right there. Thus, having said that and doing the thus means next step. Melzar took away the portion of the meat. He took that king's rule, regulation, commandment, took it away. He said, I'll do away with it. And the wine that they should drink, and gave them the bulk. He just left them on the water and the vegetables. And they survived, and they got strong, and they did well. 17 tells us, as for these four children, God gave them something. For their, again, I just think integrity, and their standing up for what they believed in, and not caving in, and not rolling over any way you want to put it. God gave them a reward, and that reward was knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel especially understanding in all visions and dreams. And we'll have more lessons down the road about that. I keep banging that thing. It's good. And we'll see that later on. But he was the only one, because he stood out head and shoulders above the other three. Now they all got very honorable positions, you know, in the king's castle and stuff. But so now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, and the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. Now Nebuchadnezzar was a really, 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 really sharp dude. I mean, he was a brilliant man in lots and lots of ways. And after that 3 years of these boys all being taught, like going to colleges and getting scholarships and going on, higher learning. They knew the Jewish law, and but now they was learning the culture and the laws and astrology, everything they could be, you know, taught. So they were like Paul, really educated in any way you could get. So at the end of that 3 years, he says, okay, you've been judging them, but now the king can do it. So he goes in and he talks to all of them. he has conversations with them, and he brings up different subjects to them. But to do that for these many different people, he had to be a scholar himself. He had to be versed in all the subjects that he was going to talk about, ask about, so that he could determine the difference in them, in the right and the wrong, and who's there. And remember this, the king, great king, had all kinds of counselors and advisors and people around him. Anything that priest, whatever subject he could bring in extra, come in, just like a president, they got advisors now, presidents, they can't be experts on everything, they bring in the generals for war, they bring somebody else on the economy, they bring in somebody else on this or that, on the politics or the finances, specialists in every area, right? Presidents doing, all people do that. But so Nebuchadnezzar did that, but he was able to sort that out. And here is his renderings. At the end of these days, and the king had said he should bring them in to the prince of eunuchs, brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed, that means he talked and he tested with them. And among them was all found none like Daniel. Like I say, he really excelled. Daniel was super smart, super everywhere. God really blessed him. And God did reward him. Remember, I told you He gave him wisdom, and He gave him a reward for being good service. And Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah, therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters, get this, in all matters of wisdom and understanding, that the king inquired of them, multiple subjects, multiple things he talked about. He found them to be 10 times better than all the magicians, all the astrologers that were in his realm. Huge kingdom. Like I say, he already had all these experts in every field that you could think about. But when he compared what he had to these young guys, 10 times smarter, 10 times better. So they were set up for his elite services. And like I say, I can't, but we know about ends right there. So Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. Means that he was 12-year-old when we start this lesson. When we get done with this series of lessons on Daniel, he'll have served under 4 different kings. And there's a lot of things that we'll study even yet. But 70 years of service and 4 kings. And but you got to back up and say, what can I get out of that even yet? Boys now, but great things to come in the future. And then the integrity thing keeps bouncing back to me. Integrity is what you are yourself inside. You don't have to be coerced. You make your own decisions. You don't have to. You're not. Some people will fall into a category of casual Christians. Casual people, casual Christians. Come to church, sign a Christian. But they'll cheat on this, lie on this, steal on that, do this, go to church 4 times a year, maybe Christmas and Easter, and say, I'm a Christian. Something comes up, taxes or something like, well, God ain't gonna notice that, or that's no big deal. Not being generous or whatever. And that's the kind of, but because they were kind of judged and influenced by others. Casual Christians roll over. Politicians roll over. I'm going to get a little bit political right here. I'll give you an example. Kamala Harris. We've known her for years. Known her for years. Known what she said for years. Everything. But she had different positions in California and all over the country, didn't senator, and but she's got a history. So, as things fall out and Biden falls over, and as luck would have it, running for president. So now, because she's running for president, she's rolling over. She's flip-flopping on everything. That's a casual Christian. That's what that's the kind of like the popular voter. They roll over. They just go along and get along, you know, depending on what crowd they're in. But not these guys. Not Daniel. They didn't roll over. They had integrity. So the lesson for us is to develop more integrity. Be yourself. The only one you got to impress is God. That's the only one we got to do. We don't have to impress nobody else. So I'll kind of leave you there. That's an introduction to Daniel. Lots of prophecy we're going to cover. And but just take that home. Remember the word integrity, and that's what he had. And he was really rewarded for it. Thank you.